Here we are for episode 3 of What Kind of World, and a little bit different today because we are away from each other. I'm
obviously
still up
in two different places, yeah.
I'm still in Aberdeen, and you are?
I'm down in Dundee staying with our daughter who's just started a new job and has twilight shifts at the hospital, so is needing someone to pick her up at 12 noon because she doesn't drive and no buses.
12 midnight.
12 midnight, yes. No buses running. So we're hanging out in the morning, and then I'm hanging by myself while she's at work, and then I'm picking her up. So be home on Saturday.
Sounds good. So, it's probably worth saying that we're recording this on Thursday in the week. There's a big event that's going to happen tomorrow, which we'll come back to later in the world of international politics. But our first segment that we wanted to talk a bit about, and this again, this is a little bit of kind of laying sort of groundwork on where we are with what's going on in the world today, is just to talk a bit about democracy itself. So we were talking about kind of morality and our kind of foundations for how we make choices last week, and this week thinking about the kind of structures that govern society. Mm-hmm. And so we're obviously Gen X. We were both born in 1970. So
now you're telling.
Yeah. So, but I think that because of that, when we were growing up and kind of formative years, we saw some major changes.
Yeah, huge.
In the world.
The end of history, supposedly.
Yeah, well, exactly. Francis Fukuyama. And talking about because that liberal democracy was so much on the rise. It was so
obvious. Yeah, it was so obviously the right solution, and so you saw the fall of communism and the Berlin Wall coming down, and all of this stuff, and it looked like at the time Russia was moving towards capitalism and democracy, and so it looked like
as with all the post-Soviet countries, looked like that's where they were headed. They were headed towards democratic structures. It's the third wave of democratic gain. The kind of historians talk about this, the second half of the 20th century. This kind of big push towards democracy. Maybe around 60 countries or something like that. I think in that kind of period, moving towards a greater participation in decision making for a country. So everything seemed like that's where things were moving, and there's probably some kind of complacency that in some ways that was part of. I mean, I just was trying to think back the last few days on kind of mindset, like through the 90s and everything, and even the early 2000s. Though I suppose, definitely definitely in the 90s, things felt like it was just
on the right track.
Yeah, and that's that famous phrase that Obama borrowed from Martin Luther King about the kind of the trajectory of the kind of moral arc.
The arc of the universe bends towards justice.
Yeah, it felt like that was true, that there was something right in that things were getting better for a sense of more participation and folks having more say in how they were governed, what was going on. And then in the 21st century, that is just in major decline. And
although there've always been people pushing back against more participation. I mean, you think post-World War, but post-World War, I guess you had the whole civil rights movement, but that was a struggle where people lost their lives, and there was a huge backlash, and we actually still see the results of that backlash now. Prior to the civil rights movement, the South was reliably Democratic. And then after Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill, it has become reliably Republican, right? Mm-hmm. So there's always been people who were less happy with the movement towards more participation by all groups and more. And I mean, it's right. It's the whole liberal Democrat and different emphasis on our morality, right? So the kind of harm, the not doing harm and caring for others, including others, right? Equality, participation. But then you have, if you're a more conservative person, then you want to preserve traditional structures. You see, when you change those too quickly, you feel like it destabilizes society. And that's something we didn't really get to last week. I mean, that is what Haidt goes on to say. He does say that the conservatives do have, they have more intuition about, the necessity of groups for keeping society stable. Right, so you actually need a healthy, liberal, conservative back and forth, yin and yang, he calls it, in order to have a kind of healthy democracy that moves forward, and that liberals push it to move forward, and conservatives say, wait a second, not too fast. And if everyone is healthy and you're there's mutual respect, then you can have that dialogue, and it is good for society as a whole, and it's good for democracy. But I think that's part of what we're losing at the moment.
Yeah. So there's there are certain bodies like Freedom House, which was set up by Eleanor Roosevelt, I think, was one of the participants back in the early 40s. So a body that would monitor democracy and freedom around the world, and it's been tracking how there is a resurgence towards autocracy, mm-hmm. and a decline in democratic freedoms around the world, and they have a kind of table that has all the different countries, right. And kind of where they whether they're free or partially free or established authoritarian, or these different things.
Illiberal democracy, as Orban famously
illiberal democracy, yeah.
Illiberal democracy, so not really.
We'll maybe come back to that kind of that's so I suppose what you're seeing here, and maybe that sense that we have of, especially for our generation, that didn't kind of fight for the freedoms that the kind of generation that would have gone through the Second World War, and saw that battle, and that some of this you have to fight for. It just seemed to be kind of happening. Because
it had already happened. A lot of it, the civil rights movement, obviously it's still going on, but the heyday of it was before we were born. I mean, Roe v. Wade was when we were toddlers. Yeah. Women's liberation in general.
You need to explain.
And so Roe v. Wade was the kind of American Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion. But at the same time, it was in the 70s when we were children that women first were able to get a credit card in their own name, right? Or not to have your husband sign-ons. So there were a lot of things that were happening, and women were getting more freedom and more control when we were children. So by the time we were teenagers, young adults, it just seemed like it had always been there.
I mean, in the Church of Scotland,
our generation,
that was it was before we were born that women were able to be ordained as elders and into the ministry. So we grew up. That was just.
I didn't.
You didn't, indeed. We'll come on to that on another episode, I'm sure. But what we have seen are some of the around inclusion for LGBT folks as something that has been part of our generation's kind of fight for equality.
Yes.
That's been taking place. But that was moving on, and things were getting better. And that leads you into a kind of assumption that this sort of movement, a movement towards greater freedom and equality, and a sense that nations would strive to do what most people would think is the right thing. Is like a given. That's what's happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of things is I think America has not a great track record in terms of supporting democracy abroad. We've been quite happy to support and even put in place autocrats when we felt like that was in our financial best interest with oil and in the Middle East. So in some respects, we've talked out of both sides of our mouths, right? So we say, yes, democracy, that's how everyone should have a say in their government. But yet we have been willing to, and some of those chickens are coming home to roost, I think. But the other thing is, and I think this goes back to what we were talking about last week with the differences between people who lean liberal and lean conservative, is that we're talking about, greater inclusion, more people involved, opening everything up. Those are very liberal values. And they push against things like authority and, purity, these kind of things that, and loyalty, right? Because actually, so you've always had this tension, I think, whereas not everyone thinks that the changes in society are for the better. It seems obvious to us, but I don't think it's obvious to everyone. And certainly, and I know recently, and we've spoken about it, and you've read it as well, there was a psychology professor in Canada, Robert Altemeyer, who I think fell into studying authoritarian followers in the 80s. I mean, he just kind of, I'm not quite sure the story, but so he spent his career looking at not authoritarians themselves for the most part, but why people follow authoritarians, because authoritarians, they get their power from the people who follow them. And so he developed what's called the right-wing authoritarian scale, which I think if you go to the yourmorals.org, that scale is there. And if you want to take it, I would suggest that you turn this off and go and take it without me telling you what it is, because I think that can then affect your score on it. But basically, when he gave this questionnaire to people, you get about a third of people who actually actively want to follow an authoritarian leader. So it's going to be people who are conservative because they really highly value deference to authority, loyalty, in-group loyalty, tradition and purity, all of this stuff. And so this group is always, I think it's just there in every society. And then if it's activated by authoritarian wannabes, it's a bad thing. And his book, The Authoritarians, he's released it for free, and he released it for free back during the Bush administration because he saw what had been happening to the American Conservative Party, the Republicans, a long time ago, and he was really wanting to sound the alarm, like, this is really dangerous. This is something, and this was back in the 80s, we're talking 80s, 90s, we're talking about, we thought everything was fine then. He was seeing some really worrying signs way back then. So this has not been just the last decade. This is, and this group of people who are in every society who who maybe just really don't value democracy, because then that does mean other outgroups are going to have the same say that you're going to have, and a lot of things that you don't necessarily value. They don't make your elephant's not leaning that direction. So
I think that's partly why, I mean, for me, like a major inflection point was around the Iraq War. So not the first one, but the George W. Bush led war
in response to 9/11.
Yeah, because it was, so much of it was based around false evidence, false assumptions, and so the reasoning for that, then it raises all kinds of question marks. The use of torture that became endemic through what was going on, the formation of a concentration camp. In Guantanamo Bay, but Abu Ghraib in Iraq itself, exactly. And that's one of many sites, these black sites that we used to torture people, and how that became acceptable and kind of normal. Which that was, for me, it was a real kind of things are not quite as they seem.
Yes, and that was what Altemeyer, he was reacting to. A lot
to that
of what was going on during the second Bush administration.
And I think that's then, it's partly what is. It makes you realize that democracy is not an end point, that it is all a process. So I think that, and that's where the Francis Fukuyama was just so, and he's acknowledged it himself subsequently, that he just had misread completely what was. I mean, well, I suppose he was reflecting some of what he was seeing, but was not fully putting it into context of everything that was going on. That a liberal democracy, so a kind of free democracy, is always something that you have to work on. You can't ever just take it for granted and we're there, we've arrived, it's that. No, you've got to constantly be striving to make it work, to fine tune it, to be, because new challenges will come up and you've got to respond to those, and that's that. I think that's what we're really seeing at the moment. That when there's a big pushback against a liberal democracy, then if you don't have the tools in your hands to be able to push back against it, and I think a lot of parties, kind of what we'd call the mainstream parties, so over here in the UK, Labour, Liberal Democrats, the Conservative Party, have not really had the tools to properly push back on it, or when they have, they've kind of run a little bit scared of that. So I was just thinking, the example that just came to mind was during the Brexit referendum, so going back 10 years now, there was like 1 week when David Cameron, who was the Conservative Prime Minister at the time, used the argument that being a part of Europe is being part of a peace project. The whole, one of the major reasons for being part of Europe is that when you're working together, you're tied with each other in collaborating together, you're much less likely to end up fighting with each other.
Yeah.
And he
Seems
tried that
sensible
for
to
like
me.
a day or two, and then the press was so... Right, where was I? So the with David Cameron, he tried that argument for, I think it was like a day or 2 days, and the media came down on him like a ton of bricks, like this was some kind of threat. Like if you say that it's a peace project, then the alternative is you're saying that we'll inevitably go to war, which was a ridiculous argument. Yeah. But he then never mentioned it again. So he completely backed away from that kind of positive argument for being part of working together. Anyway, it was just kind of one example that's always stuck in my mind there.
Yeah, well, I think one of our problems is that we, again, going back to what we were saying last week and what Haidt says, is that ideally you have people who lean conservative and people who lean liberal, and even though they lean different directions, we all do value the same moral foundations, we just weight them differently. And so if we understand that, and we understand that both sides are acting in good faith, and you have dialogue, and there's a yin and a yang, there's give and take, and one side is dominant and then it swings back and then it's going to swing back, right? And so you kind of make progress as a society, but you don't do it too quickly, and then society hangs together. But I think at the moment, when we spoke about it last week, we're at this situation where the two sides are not yin and yang in kind of a good faith negotiation. Everyone demonizes the other side. And there's so much misinformation out there that we're not even working with the same set of facts. So we say we want democracy, but I think there are a lot of people who feel like the liberal side is trying to take away their way of life. So they're really maybe okay with an autocrat if that autocrat is going to set in stone what they want set in stone, because they don't feel like they can have, and they've been told they can't have a good, reasonable dialogue with a back and forth, and you win some, you lose some kind of attitude with people on the left, right? So democracies only work if both sides are legitimate, right? And if both sides acknowledge that when they lose, and that when the other person wins, they've legitimately won. And so we have to work within that system. And I don't think we saw that, right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that's a both sides thing.
No. I don't think that is a both sides thing. I think that's I think that.
But it is. For sure, it's one of the foundational things of democracies is.
Well, I think we're getting to both. I think we're getting to both sides, though, on not seeing each other as acting in good faith, right? If you go on Threads now, and you remember when Michelle Obama said, "When they go low, we go high." You definitely see a lot of, where did that get us? Right? They went low, we tried going high, and now we're facing an autocratic takeover, right? So there is a lot of schadenfreude about Trump voters who are losing jobs and whose farms are losing money, and right? And there's
well, maybe can we maybe come back to, because I think that's probably what you're wanting to talk about later. So yeah. So if we go high and stay high, we're thinking about what is happening in democracies at the moment. So we're kind of more just aware of the issues that are taking place. Because democracy is it's pretty rare for a democracy just to be overturned. Democracies tend, what you see is a backsliding. It's a decline in democracy, and part of that is you've got the some of the folks talk about it as the winner's dilemma or the loser's dilemma, these two different aspects of it. So the winner's dilemma is that if you win power in a democracy, mm-hmm. and so then you have the tools of democracy kind of in your hands, it is very tempting to use those tools to try to protect your position, to gain mm-hmm. more power, to change the rules about how elections work, how funding how funding for parties works, all that sort of thing, in order to use to stay in power, basically. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about what the winner's dilemma is. The loser's dilemma is kind of fascinating, particularly in the United States, because whereas here in the United Kingdom, the local councils organise all of the elections, but there are kind of rules across the country on how you do it. That is not the same in the United States. The states kind of organise and have quite different rules on how elections mm-hmm. are run, just the mechanics of running an election
and how you can vote. And
so there you have where one president might get elected against the will of those who are then in control of a state legislature. So in some ways they are the losers, mm-hmm. but they have control over some tools that they can then use to manipulate the system. And you obviously saw that over from 2020 onwards. So when mm-hmm. Biden was elected, and then some of the decisions that were going on in some of the states that were Republican. Had Republican legislatures to try to. Now it happens a bit both ways. That what's going on, and there's been a lot of legislature around the voting in the states in the last 5 years or so. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of legislation going through the states.
A fair amount of voter suppression.
So that's the when you're thinking about it's very rare for any kind of voting issues to be like voter fraud, as folks will use it as a tool to argue. It's much more likely that it's more subtle. So it's in the politicians choosing the electorate, rather than the electorate choosing the politicians through gerrymandering or stopping, having lots of voting places in nice suburban white communities and one in a massive black community. So or where there's a university. Right. Yeah. So that if you want to vote at the university or you want to vote in a black neighborhood, you have to stand in line for 5 hours. Whereas I think my parents just waltz in and they vote and then they waltz back out again. As we would do here. As we would do here. Yeah. So the lines to vote are a choice. Those are a choice. Those are choices that the powers that be are making, and it isn't to empower voters, is it? And so that's that's where you get and I suppose the bigger picture of democracy. So that's what we're talking about there is the vertical accountability. So it's the accountability of the electorate has over those in power, that they hold them to account through being able to vote them in or out of office. And a democratic system that's working. Yeah. Now, the other part of it is the horizontal accountability, and that's the institutional accountability. And there, in places where democracy is vibrant and healthy, you have both of these in that are strong and working well. So there's accountability between these, and that's the whole separation of powers that you have.
Absolutely. The institutions are independent. Yeah. They're not being controlled by the elected politicians, right?
Or or just by the executive.
By the executive, which is what we see happening in the States. I mean, that's a very, you were talking about the different things that were happening in 2020 at the state level when Trump was trying to find 11,000 more votes in Georgia. And you certainly did have some state legislatures that are people at the state level that were going along with the fake electors and things. But you had a lot of Republicans who were standing up and saying, no, that's not what happened.
Was the
right? And in Arizona as well. I mean, and these were Republican officials who voted for Trump, and they were getting death threats from their own side because they weren't willing to steal the election. And what we're seeing now with Trump back in office is he is clearing, he obviously can't do it at the state level, but certainly at the federal level, he's clearing out anyone who would stop him. So Bill Barr, who was the attorney general the first time, told him, you lost the election. Do you think Pam Bondi's going to tell him he's lost an election, or that Republicans are? She's not, right? She's not independent.
And further, you're saying it's not happening at state level, but Brad Raffensperger, who was he the attorney general in? He was the guy in Georgia that we had the recording of the call where Trump's saying, just find me these extra 11,700 votes or whatever it was, and Raffensperger said no, and he was a Republican. Well, one of the pieces of legislation that the state passed was to take that responsibility away from that role.
Right.
Yeah, so it is happening at both state level and at the federal level there.
And here's the thing that people need to realize is that we have about 30% of any population that is absolutely okay with authoritarianism, especially if they've been scared into thinking that the other side is bad. They've been scared into thinking that their privileged status is at risk. They think that this authoritarian is going to do what they want to do and impose their views on other people. Mm-hmm. They are quite happy with that, right? I think if they're activated, right, by fear, you can see that, right? Fear of immigrants is a huge thing. Fear of trans people, right? It's picking easily demonized groups and making your voters afraid of them, and then they can be encouraged to just give up on democracy, right?
So I guess that's partly where that resilience in the at institutional level, which used to be what those who are conservative politically would be all about, is trying to have that strong institutional resilience that it would defend against radical shifts backwards and forwards, that is there to help protect a society against heading into these. So you've got experts who actually deal with data and facts, and they use that information to help those who are decision makers to make the right decisions. And now we have, when the right data is released, but it's not the data that the president likes, he will fire the person that publishes that data, which he has just done in the last few weeks.
So now we basically know you can't trust the information coming out of the government, right? Because it's going to be...
That's the institutional resilience falling apart.
Yeah. So the question of what is going to happen to democracy in the States is really an open one, you know? It certainly is under attack, and it's, unfortunately... Trump and Project 2025 have had the 4 years of the Biden presidency to kind of fine-tune plans, and they knew that they needed to come in and clean out anyone who would have held up the institutional those kind of barriers to autocratic rule. And they cleared those people out.
Well, you realise that so much of a healthy democracy is based around. Well, we often talk about the kind of norms that you have and the kind of unwritten rules, and that sense of respecting one another is. You go back and listen to some senators that have been in the Senate for years and years, and what life was like 30, 40 years ago, where they would socialize together from across the and that all of that seems to have gone. There is no.
Well, I think that started with Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich encouraged people to not move their families to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So to leave the families back at home. So when families started being left back at home, then the representatives would come, would huddle with their crowd, and then they would go home at the weekend, and the families kids weren't going to school together, wives weren't meeting up, husbands weren't meeting up, they weren't socializing because they weren't there to socialize. Yeah. So that I think, and of course that's one of the things that kind of helps maintain or can change some of the fear of others that you have in a more conservative leaning kind of personality is meeting people who are different than you and realizing, they're great people. I mean, that's a big part of how I changed, right? Mm-hmm. Is I got outside of the conservative bubble that I had lived in, and I met people who had different viewpoints than what I'd been raised with, and I realized, these are great people. When that went away, we lost, I think, something that was a protective factor for our democracy. Only we didn't realize it because it happened 30 years ago.
Yes, and it's one of those things that when you have it, you just take it for granted because it's just it's normal. It's being kind and nice. It's just one of those things, and now we're losing that. You end up in a more crass, violent, and fearful place.
Well, and a place where people with opposing viewpoints just aren't able to talk to each other, let alone work with each other. And that's really, really very damaging for the long-term health of any democracy, right? You need to have two healthy political parties. So even though here in the UK... Or more. Oh, yeah. I mean, even though here in the UK, we're not anywhere... we're obviously not going through what the States are. I don't think that we have two healthy political parties. So I think it's very worrying for democracy here as well.
Yes, and that's...
on either side, what happened with the Conservatives under Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss, and then the way they've splintered with Farage. And Farage is just a mini Trump wannabe. And he's, openly aping what's happening in the States. It just astonishes me that anyone looks at what's happening in the States and says, I want the guy who says he's going to bring it here. That just seems crazy to me. But again,
a lot of people do.
A third of people in any society, it's not just in the States. And if they're getting misinformation and if they're getting fed fear by their leaders, which we have happening here, right? Fear and misinformation are hallmarks of reform. That's how you activate their elephants, and their elephants are going to lean hard towards, I need to be protected by a strongman leader who is going to crush the other side. Yeah. That's not a democratic system.
It sure isn't. So that's where, and that's where, when you look at other parts, so you mentioned thinking about Hungary and Orban in Hungary, that how he has been very canny in using the tools of a young democracy in Hungary in order to get his way. So a lot of what we see, it's not illegal what is happening, but it is step by step eroding the rights and freedoms that people have has been hard, sometimes involving civil wars, wars of independence, these things that have led to the rights and freedoms that you aspire to. It's those are taken away a brick at a time. They're not all taken away in one move. And
although Trump and
he's going
and
fast.
Project 2025 has gone
fast.
Incredibly fast.
But they're not
troops on the streets of DC.
Yes, but he didn't do that on day one. He's been trying it. So you see it. Yeah. It's pushing. They tried it in LA, and they're trying it in DC because the rules around DC kind of allow it to happen. And then they'll see what reaction there is, and if there isn't a strong reaction to it, then they're going to try it another. You can see how it's developing step by step.
Well, it's softening everyone up, isn't it? The more you see troops on the streets, the more you think, oh, okay, I guess that's just what we have, right? And we notice that it's happening to democratic cities, right? Not happening in Republican cities.
Indeed.
And that's by design as well.
Of course.
Because his followers are really quite happy for him to stomp on the other side. Anyway, so democracy.
Yeah, so that's yes. I mean, I think it's important to put what we're kind of talking about in the sort of world that we're into we're not in a context. We're in a context of huge fluidity and change, and democracy itself is, I mean, it's in some places it is on the rise. It is, the countries are defending and they're developing their democracies positively, but particularly where there are older democracies, they do seem to be under some attack at the moment, and it comes back to that kind of winner's dilemma thing. If you've just won, you can see it you saw it with Labour in 1997 when they won that landslide, and where they could have moved towards some changes to the way so the way the elections work here, that it's more proportional and not this first past the post system, but they won so strongly that
it's hard to give that up.
Even
for a more democratic alternative.
And so it's you've got to strive and work at it all the time, which is partly what
these days I think need to work even harder these days. But I guess it's important that you recognize that democracy is largely under attack across the Western world, I think. And we have to kind of decide, yes, it's worth fighting for. We are going to fight for it, Going to have some of these awkward conversations about politics that you're told to avoid, because I think if you avoid them, then autocrats win, right? If you shut up about it.
And that's for me. That's where. I know when we were talking last week about the kind of morality in it, where would Jesus fall in some of this? There, obviously there's nothing that in the Bible about democracy, because the cultural setting was that was. I suppose there were in Greece there was some playing around with the idea around that time or a bit before, but. It wasn't really, but some of the principles that Jesus has in like giving a voice to those who are voiceless, in standing up for those who were oppressed, for holding to account those who are powerful. These are things that democracies, when they are working well, should enable.
If the moral arc is bending towards justice, which we would hope it would be.
But it doesn't do it automatically. It only works because people strive for it.
Okay, so my bit that I wanted to talk about was protests. And the right to protest does seem to be a bit under attack, even here in the UK. But we were specifically, one of our daughters messaged us Saturday morning saying that there was going to be a right-wing protest outside one of the hotels in Aberdeen that is housing refugees. And so people were putting out a call to see if counter-protesters would come. Because I think last week there had been a protest and the right wing had heavily outnumbered the counter-protesters, and I think there'd even been some kind of violence coming from the right-wing side. So anyway, we thought, well, we'll go down. So when we were there, certainly the side that we were on, there were people who were kind of protesting what was happening in Gaza, definitely people who were there thinking about wanting to support the refugees and kind of saying refugees are welcome here. It was kind of generally, typically for a liberal crowd, there were lots of marginalized groups that people were wanting to support. I think pretty typical. And there weren't that many people on the other side.
It may be worth just that, of course, there was a police presence there.
Yes, there was.
Because they knew. So you were channeled to one side of the road or the other side of the road. So there was no option of just, gathering with folks and having a chat. You were facing off on either side of the road with barriers between and police between. Yeah.
And so there was a guy with a megaphone, and then I think so he was kind of yelling out chants. And some of them I was quite happy with, kind of refugees are welcome here kind of thing. And then there were others where they were saying fascists go home, calling the other side fascists. And there was a chant, where's your protest at? Referencing the fact that there weren't very many people on the other side. I can't remember all of it, but they were, kind of alternated between being more chants about, there were Free Palestine chants, so more chants about what people were supporting and then alternating with what you're against. And it was very us and them. I just, of course, in general, it made me uncomfortable, the negative chants. And of course, the negative chants got the other side yelling back, which you would do. I mean, that's the nature of saying things that aren't very nice.
Also performing some Nazi salutes as well.
I saw one of those, yeah. So, yeah. But was that I don't know. I just, when we're talking about the need.
Yeah, I think I saw 3 people
I only saw one. Yeah. And so then in which case, yes, are they fascist? And then you do need to stand up and say, no, fascism is bad. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but I clearly do, and we oppose it. But it certainly isn't the way to start a dialogue. But then if you feel strongly enough about this issue that you're showing up on opposite sides of a protest, there probably isn't. Elephants are leaning in really very, very different directions, and I'm not sure, I think they're often for dialogue, there has to be relationship first, and then dialogue. But it is difficult.
It is. I get torn between the desire to show solidarity with those who are being are being victimized,
which is why we were there. That's why we went.
Predominantly why we went is to show solidarity, and then the calling names, which I don't think is helpful. But then on the other hand, if
people are throwing Nazi salutes.
If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, and blah blah blah, all that sort of thing, there's a point at which naming what is happening is important. It
makes me so sad.
Yeah.
And yeah, Anyway, it was an interesting experience. I think we stayed for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
I did chat with a lady who works with refugees, and she was there with her daughter, and chatted with a guy who'd been there last week. And he was the one saying that I think there hadn't been as big a police presence last week, and there had been a lot more people protesting against the refugees, and he, he said that there were people right up in his face, and it had been quite intimidating. I think he said that they hadn't really advertised the last week because they were afraid advertising it would maybe bring out people in support of refugees, but also bring out more people to protest refugees. But they kind of had realized, well, when you don't advertise it, then you're completely overwhelmed, because the side that is kind of following the Farage line, that refugees are all bad, and they are advertising it, and so people are showing up on their side. So that's why there had been more advertising for last week, and there was a much better turnout, and then a lot more police as well. So
I saw I saw there was an interview that Channel 4 News had with Dame Andrea Jenkins, who used to be a Tory MP and is now Reform, where it was it Christian Guru Murthy who was doing the interview and was asking her about what to do with. I think the context of it was something about for women, the conference that she was at, and so of course she was wanting to use the language that there seems to be a preponderance of those who are seeking asylum or refugees are committing crimes. Now that is not
just
true.
Not true.
It is just not true. But that was the argument. He was pushing her on that, on what do you expect to do, and she had no good response at all to it. But that same language we certainly heard being yelled across the road, and including to a mum and a young daughter who had come out, and it made me so uncomfortable.
But again, Reform doesn't need to offer solutions, because their target audience, they're just looking to make them scared, right? And you could see that on the other side. They were yelling things like, they're all rapists, they're all, right? I mean, it was clearly just completely wrong, but they obviously believed it, and they were afraid of it, and that's why they were coming out. And again, if your elephant leans more conservative, and you are loyal to your group, and you're loyal to your authority and purity, you can see why that pushes those buttons. But it's being pushed by falsehoods. But I think the people pushing those buttons know what they're doing, and it's scary. And I think that's why we do need to talk about what's happening. And I think everyone needs to be involved in the conversation. So, and we need to have some of these uncomfortable conversations with people who maybe think, oh yeah, Farage, he tells it like it is. Well, no, he's lying to you. And he's trying to make you scared of things so that you don't focus on the things that really are causing your problems.
Indeed, exactly.
Right?
Anyway. I think Christian Guru Murthy is a fantastic journalist on Channel 4 News. And so that's exactly where he was pointing at, well, those who are within the household are far more likely to commit abuse, and these are the facts of the case. I don't. Did you see there was this is exactly what you're talking about here in Newbridge in South Wales, a wee village. There was a group of youths from Scotland that had gone to a scout camp. So it was a group going to a scout camp, and the local population somehow got in their minds that this was a group of immigrants that were camping out in a scout camp, go figure, and started hurling abuse at them online. And I think in person, when the group left, there were folks there, and so the police are now investigating that. There was no truth to it at all. But here a community was riled up because of the rhetoric of fear that's being used to attack a group of young people.
To gain power, autocrats don't need truth, they just need fear. And if lies are going to get them that fear, then that's what they'll use. And just to finish this little segment, I'm an immigrant, but no one ever thinks of me as an immigrant.
Now, why would that be, Carolyn?
Yeah, why would that be? No one ever thinks of me as an immigrant.
Indeed. Right, our last segment for this week is bouncing to the United States and Russia, and Stephen Witkoff is President Trump's special envoy for the kind of peace talks. Put that in apostrophes, between Russia and Ukraine. He's also been involved in the Middle East. He has no experience of doing
experience. Of course, he doesn't.
No, he is a golf buddy of Donald Trump. He's a real estate guy, a lawyer. I think his background is.
All we need is loyalty to the end group. We don't need expertise.
So
which is another hallmark of authoritarian systems, right?
Yeah. So Witkoff has been in talks with Putin's folks, with the Russians, about Ukraine, and this has led to the meeting that's going to be taking place tomorrow in Alaska, Russia. We'll come back to that. The thing that it just, this is where I can't help myself, as much as I want to understand where folks are in different. There's part of me sometimes just like, can you not see what is going on here? And so what happened in one of these meetings, and it's a meeting where Witkoff was meeting with the folks, and I think it sounds like he misunderstood he misunderstood what was being said, and this is because he goes in on his own. He's reliant on an interpreter from Russia to be involved in this, which is the same thing that Trump did previously when he met with Putin in Helsinki, wasn't it, in the first term?
And he didn't want anyone in there.
Yeah, so it's him alone with Putin on and the Russian interpreter. So you have no idea what was said.
Doesn't ring alarm bells. I don't understand.
Exactly. So in this meeting that Witkoff had, he gets given a medal that has come from Putin, and it's the Order of Lenin medal, which Putin tells him to go and give to the father of a guy called Michael Gloss. Now, Michael Gloss was a young guy who moved from America to Russia. Now, I believe he had mental health issues. There were things going on in his life, and he decided that moving to Russia was the right thing to do. And then he died fighting in Ukraine. Right. Now, his dad is a senior CIA official. Right. So Putin gives Witkoff a medal for this young man's bravery, Order of Lenin medal, for fighting on the side of Russia against one of the allies of the United States. Right? And Witkoff just accepts it and then brings it over. And there's part of me is like, why can you not see the games that Putin is playing? It's so obvious what is going on here, that this is rubbing Trump's nose in it, it's rubbing the United States' nose in what is going on. It's a show of power by Putin over the United States, and Witkoff did not have the gumption to see what was going on and say, sorry,
but
no.
Hasn't the Trump administration always seemed like it was pretty much on Russia's side? I mean, it just feels like that's their outlook is, oh yeah, of course. I don't know why a Trump official who is loyal to Trump wouldn't take that medal, because Trump clearly has an affinity for Putin and is clearly positioning America on Putin's side. So
yes, I'm not saying that I'm not surprised by why Trump but why the American people don't see it is enough to I mean, this is just one tiny little example of all these things that are going on, but it kind of struck a chord just because it's so on the nose and in your face, and this is all in the lead up to Trump meeting Putin. Now, this meeting is going to be a disaster. You know it. It's going to be an utter disaster. I mean, for America, it's brilliant for Putin. He gets to meet with, now, bearing in mind Putin has arrest warrants out on him by the International Criminal Court for the kidnapping of children from Ukraine.
Who are still Russia. And didn't at the beginning of the Trump administration, there was a team at Yale that was trying to track these children and and the Trump administration just came in and
stopped it.
Did away with that program. I think I remember reading. So this is why you don't see Putin visiting any of the European countries, because he would be arrested. I mean, he'll go to Hungary, where he's got a friendly dictator in place, but he's not going to come to the Autocrats stick together.
He would be arrested. So it's deeply shameful that America is hosting Putin. I'd feel a bit differently if Trump went to Moscow about it, but the fact that that Alaska is going to be hosting this event is, I know where I'd be protesting.
Well, I think it's just a sign that democracy is definitely being under attack in the States, right? And Putin I mean, Trump is a wannabe Putin, isn't he? I mean, I think it just is. It just shows you that. If you read Ann Applebaum, Autocracy, Inc., autocrats, strongmen, democracy is bad for them, right? Because it puts in guardrails.
Accountability.
Right? It asks for accountability. So she doesn't say that they're, actively colluding, but they certainly would support each other. And they, because if everyone's an autocrat and if every society is ruled by a group of elites and there's no democratic accountability, it makes life a lot easier for those elites. I mean, much worse for everyone else, but a lot easier for those elites. So I just think that's what you're seeing with Trump and Putin and the kind of.
So what I think we should probably expect to see from this is that there may be some crazy plan that Putin and Trump come up with that involves Ukraine giving up more land that they actually currently hold and giving that up to Russia, and Ukraine,
and getting
of
nothing
course, getting nothing in return. Yes, not even any security guarantees or anything like that.
No.
So
they already have security guarantees that that Russia's ignoring, that America's ignoring, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be in return for them giving up the
Budapest
nuclear weapons
agreement. Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
we're supposed to guarantee their security, and that's clearly not happening.
So Ukraine will have to reject that, obviously, and then Trump can say, well, look, I tried, and it's all Ukraine's fault, and because they're not doing anything, we'll pull all of our support for them, which is exactly what Putin wants to happen.
But then Trump wants what Putin wants. He's not, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but, there may be something going on. It may just be as simple as an autocrat wants to help another autocrat.
Do you know, it's this weird... Well, Trump is a weak man, right? But he's a bully, and this is partly why why does Trump see you? Because it really seems that Trump thinks Ukraine did the wrong thing in fighting back. He says it over and over again. He just said it a few days ago that he doesn't understand why it didn't have to come to this. It didn't have to come to this. Well, what does he mean by that? That Ukraine just rolled over and let Russia take over. So the bully wins because that is who Trump is. That's what he has done all his life. He rolls over people, he bullies them, and he gets his own way almost all the time. He seems to get his own way. Well, here, Zelensky is doing what any sensible leader would do. He is fighting for the life of his democratic country.
It'll be
Anyway,
interesting to see.
It's going to be.
Your prediction was correct.
Oh well, I'm not the only one to think it. It's but I won't be at all surprised, but it's. If that Helsinki in the last, I just remember watching that and being horrified, and you know what it was like. It's not the same when you watch it subsequently, but the first time you watch The Office, particularly the British version of the Office, you had you had that sense of. The embarrassment for somebody else was just so palpable, and I remember having that for the United States, in that this is your leader who is bowing and scraping before a dictator, and how embarrassing a murderous dictator, how embarrassing that was. And I'm sure we're going to see the same thing again on Friday. Yeah. We will see. We will see.
Well, we can talk about it next week.
Indeed. And the last little bit of good news, did you see that J.D. Vance has just landed in Scotland yesterday?
Oh, lovely.
There we are.
Well, he does seem to enjoy a good holiday.
It's weird how he tries to keep out of the news an awful lot at the moment, isn't it? Strange.
Lots of money being spent on his holidays.
Yep.
He's having way more than your average American, seems to me.
Your 2 weeks of holiday that the average American has, huh? Yeah. Exactly. Huh? Okay, well, that's probably enough for this week. We covered a bit of ground there.
I think so.
And of course, like where we're headed with all of this is that we're going to be doing a deeper dive into what Christian nationalism is. And just even this last week, we've seen some really scary stuff coming out about it.
And has been playing in the States for a really long time.
Yeah. This is
play a long game.
Yeah, this is decades in the preparation. So we're going to do a bit of and so we're going to start having a look at that next week. Okay.
Fun and games.
Fun. Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.